So thank you everybody. On behalf of Dr. Ramesh Vora and Dr. T.P. Sahu, it is my pleasure to welcome everybody to this next session on COVID and pandemic and cancer patients. Today we have a very important topic, and I think all of us will be eagerly waiting to understand the data, actual data in cancer patients during the COVID pandemic. Uh, it is our privilege to have Dr. Ullas Batra as the moderator, and the data is going to be presented from Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute, Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, Apollo Hospital, Chennai, and Spurs Hospital, Bhubaneswar. So with these words, I hand over to Dr. Ullas to take it forward.
Okay, thank you, sir. And as you said very rightly, a very important topic to be discussed. I think that's something which I've learned from Kumar and you actually, sir, that, I mean, बहुत हो गया बाहर का data देखना, अपना data देखते हैं. So, that's very, very important because as we know that the way Italy and New York behaved in the first wave, we didn't behave in the first wave. In the second wave, we were almost similar to what the European countries and everything is. And, in India and, eminence-based medicine is very, very important. Other than eminence-based होता है. अरे मेरे यहाँ पे 5 लोग आए, 4 मर गए. I know of these people. And every day in our Google charts, we listen to, this is severe, but where is the data? I mean, ultimately it boils down to where is the data? So today we have 4 centers from north, south, east, west. And since I'm the moderator, I'm a good moderator. So, and always ladies first. So Badira, can you present the TMH data first?
Sure. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
I think...
So the flow would be, it's okay, till the time you are arranging your slides, I'll talk.
No, I need to get a co-host honor.
And ma'am, you can share slides without that.
Okay, thank you.
So the flow of the program will be that, first we present the data, and after that we will have an open house discussion on the data. We can in fact do it later on also. I mean, during the presentation also, we can discuss at that time. We can discuss it later also. So whatever everybody agrees. So over to you, Badira.
Yeah. So hi all. Good evening to everybody. So I'll be doing only the pediatric cancer data in COVID-19 in the pediatric population. Our experience at TMH Mumbai. So if we look from the day the pandemic started, when we first had a positive case in the month of April, yes, till now, which is last month, we had a total of 219 children who were diagnosed with COVID. And sorry. So the thing is, 219 children, these are the children who are actually on active treatment for cancer. That means they are either on systemic chemotherapy, most of them, majority of them, or they were planned for surgery or were undergoing radiotherapy. So in this 219 children, the all-cause mortality is 5.9%. That is, we had 13 children who were diagnosed with COVID and died during the period they were diagnosed with COVID-19. And out of this 13 children, so that comes to 5.9% of our cohort of COVID positive children. And 3 children out of this 13 had progressive disease. They died due to disease and not due to the complications of COVID-19. I'll come to that in a next slide. So the all-cause mortality, as I've said, was 5.9%. That's a total of 13 out of the 219 children. Progressive disease, where we attributed the mortality was due to that, was 3 out of this 13. So that was 1.5% of the total cohort. The COVID-19 related mortality was 4.6%, which is 10 out of 219. So having said this, we attribute COVID-19 related mortality, it was attributed due to COVID infection, either when the patient was having COVID-19 or immediately in the subsequent weeks, where we thought that the cause of death was causally related to the COVID-19. But having said that, this high mortality rate should be taken with a pinch of salt, because many of these children were on myelosuppressive intense chemotherapy, and they had other associated infections. So to say that this was directly and only exclusively due to COVID-19 would be a matter of concern in these children. So this is probably higher because this COVID-19 related mortality is higher than the COVID-19 mortality, which is either seen in the general population or other groups, which usually are in the range of 1 to 2%. So this is higher probably due to the higher incidence of background mortality that we see in our particular cohort of cancer children on suppressive chemotherapy. So out of this 10 children, COVID-19 pneumonia was present in 6 children. Again, this is, we don't know where they had associated WAP in 2 of these 6 children. Blood culture positive sepsis was seen in 4 out of these 6 children. And, blood culture negative sepsis with other markers positive for sepsis was seen in 1. Now, 2 children with COVID-19 had a sudden cardiac arrest. The X-ray was normal, and they were otherwise okay and stable, and had developed sudden onset respiratory distress and succumbed to death. And we probably attribute this to cardiac event. We don't know the cause. Actually, we didn't have that much window to investigate for the same. We had 1 child who developed HLS post recovery. So they had a negative PCR and then had cytopenia subsequently, and all other parameters of HLH were raised, including the marrow also was suggestive of hemophagocytosis. He was refractory. There was another child again. So I'll come to that in the next slide. So these are the 3 cases where we attributed the death due to progressive disease. So one was a CML in blastocysts, already was palliated, had raised counts, was not feasible for transplant, and she died. Then there was a retinoblastoma with CNS relapse, which was palliated and positive for COVID, and the second day had raised ICT and features and died. The other child was also early medullary relapse of BALL, was palliated, had comorbidities due to the disease and the immunosuppression, and died during relapse. So these are the diseases. These are the other 10 patients whom we attributed the mortality related to COVID-19 directly or indirectly, and had associated other comorbidities too. So one was a B-cell ALL, high-risk infant ALL in remission on DI, where they get steroids and VCR doxo. Had COVID pneumonia, and this child also had cardiac dysfunction, WAP, seizures, and the cause for seizures is not known. Whatever investigations were done were within normal limits, including we did look for COVID also in the CSF. So the patient died while before attaining RT-PCR negativity. So the other child was a clear cell sarcoma of the kidney on adjuvant chemo post local therapy, was had pneumonia, developed pneumonia, had the culture BAL was positive for RSV also, PCP, COVID, also developed subsequently WAP, severe ARDS, and also had myocarditis. The other child was a relapse case again on a palliative and oral metronomic, but had severe COVID pneumonia, ARDS. The other child, the 4th case on curative treatment was a AML post-HIDAC with FN, had a CLABSI, Klebsiella, but had florid sepsis and also associated pneumonia, which was due to bacterial as well as viral. So this is a TALL case. So this is a case who after clear on HDMTX cleared the virus, but then subsequently developed cytopenias, had frank HLH on cyclosporin, on steroids, subsequently developed steroid-induced complications, and the HLH never came down. This is another child again who was negative by RT-PCR, was otherwise stable, was planned for surgery, then came with sudden onset status epilepticus, and died within less than 12 hours after coming to casualty. And the other child is an ALCL child who had a sepsis but recovered, but was RT-PCR positive, and there was sudden onset cardiac arrest again. There was gasping, and we couldn't find a cause for this child. So the last three also in the 11th case was an early relapse PLL, was admitted for prolonged FN, but then was subsequently also COVID positive. Had sudden order respiratory distress, X-ray was normal, and we don't know the cause in that child also. The other 12, case 12 is an AML. So she had a COVID positive episode. Then actually she became RT-PCR negative. Then we put her because this is upfront. She developed COVID-19, so she was given oral chemotherapy at that point. Then we took her for 3+7 induction when the RT-PCR became negative. Subsequently, she again developed FN and GNB sepsis, and again the COVID RT-PCR was found to be positive. She had refractory shock modes and succumbed to death. The case 13 also is a case of Burkitt's lymphoma on active therapy, developed GNB sepsis pseudomonas, which subsequently cleared, but then had COVID infection and COVID pneumonia. So these are the cases. So as you can see, the mortality is a bit high when you consider the worldwide mortality in the different population. But having said that, this may be due to the higher background mortality in our population of children who are on myelosuppressive therapy. Yeah, that's it from us.
Thank you, Dr. Vadira. A couple of comments before I ask Dr. Amish Vora to comment on the data. COVID in CSF, that was fantastic. How did you check?
No, so we had sent a biofire for CSF also. So one of them were doing some COVID this thing in that. So
maybe an antibody or something. I mean,
yeah.
as a tube leke to डाल दिया the CSF करके. Okay, that was one. The second thing is you had more of a hematological malignancies, I guess, no? What about the solid tumors?
So as I more in the mortality, yes, we had more of solid tumors. We had more of hematological malignancy, but we do have solid tumors. We had the Ewing's and CCSK who had FN, GNB sepsis, and one was a sudden onset post-COVID in refractory, but more of them were hematological malignancy.
Can I ask you a simple thing? Because I mean, so I would also be showing my data. This data is all the patients who got admitted, or how was this data collected?
So you mean the denominator?
The denominator, the consort diagram basically. So how was the...
So the denominator, so we tested COVID only for those who were symptomatic. So we didn't have a universal COVID testing policy for all. So in that case, it will be because we don't know the asymptomatic COVID positive people. We are just talking about the symptomatic people who were tested for COVID either because they had fever, and also a few of them were pre-procedural. When they were planned for procedure surgery, they had a COVID PCR that would come to around 20-25 patients pre-procedure. The rest all are symptomatic. They were all admitted in the COVID ward during initial stabilization.
Okay, fantastic. Amish, your comments, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ullas, and thank you, Dr. Vadira. My question was the same as what Dr. Ullas asked. I have just basically two questions to ask you, Dr. Vadira. One is, when we look at mortality in ALL, we look at mortality in ALL in the first induction mortality, then remission mortality, maintenance mortality, like that. We never combine the composite picture what you have presented. Okay, relapse patients also we have taken in hematological, upfront patients also we have taken. So if we divide them, was the mortality higher than it was expected? Otherwise, see, there is 1.2 to 2% mortality during ALL or AML. We always expect otherwise also. That's one. And second thing is, how did you fare compared to other pediatric onco centers around the world?
Okay, for the first question again, so that's what I said. It is not discernible. We cannot like separate this is due to COVID. That's what I said. So many of them has associated sepsis. They had associated VAP. So the cause of death may not be due to COVID. But since this is a pandemic and anything during the period of COVID goes into COVID-associated death also. So that is the general consensus. I mean, the general way we have to report it. Anybody who dies during a positivity for COVID, whether it is causally due to COVID per se or due to other, will go as COVID death. So that is something we can't...
That was government's directive that anybody dying during COVID. But Ullas, I would like to ask you this question that Now, in a scientific forum, are we okay following government directive, or should we go deeper into it? Because, on one side, 5.9% mortality looks very high, Dr. Badira. But when you look at the denominator of asymptomatic patients whom we have missed out, it will be much less. I'm very sure about it.
Yes, this is a limitation of the study, and because this is the way we did it, so that is acknowledged as a gross limitation of the study cohort, because we are looking only at symptomatic, and also to discern whether the patient died to COVID pneumonia or whether the ARDS was due to VAP is going to be difficult because they are positive for both.
Correct. How do you fare compared to other ped onco centers around the world, Dr. Badira? That would be the last question, and we can move forward.
So if you look at it, the mortality that so again I have to say, there is a European mortality data from the Europe. So that also it didn't have this much mortality, because as I said, their background mortality is not high. It was even less than 2%, 1%. But in that, they had taken patients who had completed chemotherapy like 3 months back also. So all our patients are rightly on therapy or just have received it like in a month period. And
Got it.
Thank you. They took it's not just symptomatic patients, they took a lot of it. So again, the denominator is different.
But there are two questions. So all these patients had taken chemotherapy in the last preceding 1 month?
Yes. 1 to 3, less than 3 months, yes.
Do you have a ballpark figure of how many people, I'm sure it's difficult, how many people were given chemotherapy, how many developed, how many died?
So during COVID, how many were given chemo?
Let's say in the month of March, we hit the pandemic second wave in April. So how many were given chemo in March? So that's what I'm trying to do in my center right now. I'll show you the data for that also, not the full one. That how many people got chemotherapy in the month of March? How many people got affected by COVID? So the impact of chemotherapy on COVID, do you think there's a relation?
So because you gave chemotherapy, the COVID came.
Mortality or something. Have you analyzed it according to that?
So that's a bigger cohort. If you look at the number of people coming, so that data has to be collected, and it is getting collected because in TMH, the number of patients coming are huge. To collate that data is a bit difficult.
We are absolutely okay. Hope mein mat bhejna. Okay. Okay, what about Missy, Dr. Badira?
Sorry, Missy. So we have not yet encountered Missy as such, because we have not yet encountered Missy in a patient. We just had one patient who had Missy already diagnosed outside and came to us. We per se don't have Missy.
And is that because of the steroids and side of chemotherapy they're getting? Because see, my wife is a pediatrician. She talks over there's Missy, and is that something strange? Why are we not setting Missy in COVID, cancer with COVID?
So Missy again is it's an immune that mediated. Could be. We don't know, but that is a probable. Hypothesis. We don't know because they are all on immunosuppressant. If you look at that for COVID, if you look at an immunosuppressed patient, we don't have complications of dengue also, because we don't have an immune system to do that inflammatory response and.
Okay. So Ullas, you have heard it wrong actually. So your wife said miss you, so you missed it.
Ullas, since we are on that, and since it's so amazing that you always mention your wife's.
He's sitting in the next room. I have to know.
No, my point is that she must be looking after non-oncology pediatric cases.
What is only one abnormal guy in the unit? So I am the normal oncology guy. She sees the normal patients.
What is Missy in her practice? This wave.
This wave is higher. That's what I was telling you. In the first wave, pediatrician had a ball. Nothing happened. This wave, they had more COVID patients. They had more Missy. They had coronary artery dilatation. They had sudden acute hepatitis. They had sudden acute MIs in their normal non-oncological patients. That is why I was very keen to hear the data of Missy. But my gut feeling is that probably because of steroids and chemotherapy, maybe the immune suppression didn't really allow the Missy to come. That's my. But Dr. Parekh, sir, we had a symposium on the pediatric cancer and COVID. I didn't attend the lecture. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So Venkatraman Radhakrishnan from Cancer Institute Adyar moderated that, and there was some discussion on Missy. And when you talk to pediatricians outside of oncology who are looking after COVID patients, they have said that there is a small but significant number of patients who are actually having that problem.
To addition to what Parikh sir mentioned, I was present during that thing. They in fact mentioned that in a non-oncological pediatric cases, COVID-related issues were less and MISI was more. So that is what, and I think Ullas, you are also echoing the same based on your wife's experience.
Personal experience. Okay. So that's great. Thank you, Badira. Thanks a ton. And we will want you to be around over there because you can maybe comment. Can I invite Dr. T. Raja's team? I think Dr. Raja has got two subsets. One subset is hematological malignancies and one subset is solid tumors. Two PGs who will present the data. With your permission, Dr. Raja, can I invite the liquid subset of your data to be presented? Solid.
Sir, is the screen visible, sir?
It is absolutely visible. You are also slightly visible in your mask. Go ahead.
Good evening to all. We are here, myself, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Jay Shankar, second year medical oncology PGs from Dr. T. Raja's unit, Apollo Cancer Center, Chennai, to present the COVID data from our unit from March 2020 to June 2021. We thank the organizing team for giving us this opportunity. Total number of COVID positive cancer patients in our hospital was 846. Total COVID positive cancer patients in Dr. T. Raja's unit 242. This include patients requiring hospitalized care during the study period. Due to unavailability of COVID beds, financial issues, some of our patients migrated to smaller hospitals for the COVID management. These cases were not included for the analysis. Hence, 92 solid malignancies and 32 hematologic malignancies were directly under our care and were analyzed. This data of 124 cases we are presenting now. Dr. Jayashankar will be presenting regarding the solid malignancies.
Good evening all. I'm going to present COVID-19 infection and outcome in solid malignancies. Variable assessed here are age, sex, site of tumor, comorbidities, critical care support, treatment status, and death rate. This is organ-wise distribution. Site of tumors include breast, intestine, lung, ovary, genitourinary, hepatobiliary, sarcoma, stomach, esophagus, head and neck, melanoma, RCC, and pancreas. Among these, most common sites are breast, intestine, lung, and ovary. Most common deaths observed in this most common deaths are observed in lung cancers. It's around 25%. Total number of deaths 8 out of 92. Total death percentage is 8.6. Age and sex distribution. Average age of patients with solid tumors 53 years. Male total number of cases 43. Female total number of cases 49. Male is to female ratio 1:1.13. Comorbidities associated with the COVID-19 infection in solid malignancies are diabetes mellitus, hypertension, coronary artery disease, chronic kidney disease, hypothyroidism, and COPD. Most common comorbidities in expired patients were diabetes mellitus and hypertension. Total number of patients with diabetes mellitus 29. Total number of patients with systemic hypertension 30. Total number of patients with CAD 6. This is the age group distribution. Around 30% of the patients were between 51 to 60 years of age. Around 26% of the patients between 61 to 70 years of age. More than 50% of the patients were between 51 to 70 years of age. Key observations in solid tumors. Maximum cases seen in breast around 21%, GIT 16%, and lung 13%. Maximum mortality seen in lung, number of deaths 3, it's around 25%. Least mortality seen with breast is around 5%. Maximum mortality seen in the age group between the 61 and 85 years, around 75%. 62% of expired patients had hypertension and 37.5% had diabetes mellitus. All deaths were observed in metastatic disease. Now Dr. Thomas will present that hematologic malignancy data.
In hematologic malignancies, 32 patients were analyzed. The variables assessed include age and sex, comorbidities, vaccination status, relation to the cancer treatment, drugs used and time of last treatment, neutropenia and GCSF use, and the outcome. Most common age group was 50 to 70 years, 16 cases. Male to female ratio 2.6:1, and of the 7 deaths, 4 were males and 3 were females. Most common comorbidities seen are diabetes and hypertension. Regarding vaccination status, no patients were previously vaccinated. Relation to the last cancer treatment, regarding the timing of last chemo, patients presenting within 14 days of last chemo had increased mortality. Regarding the drugs, of the 7 patients died, 6 were on rituximab-based treatment. Interestingly, 1 patient on rituximab had a second COVID infection nearly 6 months after the first attack. Patients on bleomycin, we had 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma patients on bleo who were requiring high oxygen, FiO2 more than 30%. They showed CT features of fibrosis by day 20. Regarding bendamustine, of the 2 patients on benda who turned COVID positive and got admitted, 1 survived and the other expired. GCSF use, patients requiring GCSF due to neutropenia who had a pulmonary involvement, a CT severity score more than 12 out of 25 at presentation, or presenting with multi-organ failure had worsening cytokine storm with GCSF use. On retrospective analysis, 6 of the 7 expired patients had received GCSF for neutropenia. Methylprednisolone, patients on methylpred showed early recovery from oxygen requirement than those on dexamethasone. Antifibrotic use. Antifibrotics we had added for patients on bleomycin who are requiring high oxygen. Long-term outcome of these patients need to be followed up. Serum immunoglobulin level, IgG and IgM especially, were low for the lymphoma patients. Regarding the mortality, we had 5 leukemia cases, nil death, myeloma, 3 cases, nil death. DLBCL, we had 10 cases admitted, 2 expired. Indolent lymphoma, 6 cases, 4 follicular, 1 mantle cell, and 1 small cell. Of this, 4 patients died. Shows a 66% mortality rate. T-cell lymphoma, 2 cases, both patients survived. Hodgkin's lymphoma, 6 cases and 1 death. Regarding mortality, increased mortality in patients with hematologic malignancies when compared to the normal population and the solid malignancy patients. The mortality percentages for us is 21.8. Leukemia, nil deaths, and we had a relapsed AML in a patient who was on remission for nearly 5 years after 1 month from the COVID recovery. Myeloma, nil deaths we had. All the deaths happened in the lymphoma group, 7 of the 24 patients. The mortality rate is high in the lymphoma group, 29%. DLBCL had less mortality when compared with follicular lymphoma, mantle cell, or CLL. And another finding, persistent RT-PCR positivity seen with the lymphoma patients. High-risk patients from our limited study, age more than 50 years, a diagnosis of lymphoma, chemo based on rituximab, benda or bleomycin, last chemo within 14 days, and for patients on rituximab maintenance, up to 3 to 4 months of last treatment, they were at a higher risk. Neutropenia and GCSF use, low serum immunoglobulin levels, and patients presenting with lung involvement or with cytokine storm had a grave outcome. Thank you.
Wow. Fantastic. I can look at from Amish's experience, this data is something fantastic. But Amish, before you lick your lips and shoot a barrage of questions, can I please request Dr. Sahu to comment on this?
Yeah.
This is called from the frying from the frying pan into this thing. It is called, Dr. Sahu.
Okay. See, I'll comment on the liquid.
Sahu, are you in the cockpit of something? I can't. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
I closed my thing. I knew you would tell. It's my son's thing. My laptop is not working well.
It's okay, Sahu. Please put on your video. The nation wants to see.
Yeah. Okay. Khush ho ja tu. Okay. No, I have 2 things to speak. First thing is, how many of the patients in the liquid malignancies in Dr. Raja's set had neutropenia? There were 7 deaths. Of the 7, how many had neutropenia when this COVID thing happened and when the mortality happened?
Can I request Dr. Raja? Dr. Raja is there? I saw him coming actually.
Anyone.
So anyone from the PGs can tell.
Because that is something that will be a very important denominator to draw conclusions to.
6 patients had neutropenia, sir.
6. Okay, so what I get out of it is, in the liquid malignancies, what is coming through is what has been spoken very clearly, that rituximab was the single most important culprit for mortality. I'll put it that way. Because if you look at it, leukemias, which we have been very clearly seeing in Badira's set, and most of the times we see myelomas do very poorly with COVID. That has not happened with your subset of your patients. The patients who have died has been predominantly rituximab based, and you gave GCSF because you had a neutropenia. So that is why the GCSF was used, because the risk was higher with neutropenia, so you use GCSF. So my question is we're looking at the mortality. How I look at it, rituximab is the major culprit, and you lost these patients majorly because of the rituximab, which is very clearly known does very poorly with COVID. The point number 2, why did you attribute those GCSF to cytokine storm? Because this could have been just because of the way your patient profiling was. To draw the conclusion, because that would have been okay if your non-GCSF patients who with neutropenia would have done good. So I would not draw that conclusion. What do you have to say with that? Because my conclusion from this set is rituximab is a major culprit. That's how I look at your hematological or liquid malignancy subset. Dr. Amish can come in, because that's how I look at it, because he is very much thrilled with the GCSF and the cytokine storm. I know that. So, but I feel here rituximab is the culprit, and that all of us know that. I have also lost one patient out of my small COVID deaths due to rituximab. So that's how we feel. What is your take first, Thomas? And then we can go to Dr. Amish.
Sir, what we had seen is patients after using GCSF, their lung got bad, sir. The pneumonia-like picture, COVID pneumonia-like picture got bad. So we were attributing this to possible cytokine storm and possible lung damage, sir.
So can I ask you a question? So you gave GCSF during COVID-19 infection when they had a pulmonary issue, is it?
When they had neutropenia. Along with neutropenia, sir.
But when you gave GCSF, there were no lung issues. The patient was not on any oxygen, nothing.
Patients were on oxygen with minimal lung involvement.
So
if it progressed after GCSF use.
So that I mean, if the patient has a pulmonary involvement and you give GCSF, there can be flooding of the lungs with the neutrophils.
With the neutrophils, that happens.
Yeah.
No, Badira, I was coming to a very important point, because I feel in this subset of the, at least the liquid malignancy, rituximab was the culprit. And these patients really did very poorly, and that's what is coming out of Dr. Raja's subset actually. That's what I feel. That's my take home for the liquid part, if I'm discussing the liquid malignancies. Dr. Amish wants to put something in.
Ullas, can I?
Yeah, sir.
Okay. So,
you are the program director.
Right, sir. In addition to what Dr. Tarini mentioned, Dr. Thomas, I'm slightly confused. 7 deaths, and out of which all were lymphomas. 4 were
Amish. Dr. Amish, can I just stop you? Can Dr. Thomas, can you please share the mortality slide? It will be easier for everyone to see once more, please. Yes, Amish, please go on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So 4 out of 6, what you said were indolent lymphomas. 6 people, out of which 4 died. You admitted 6 indolent lymphomas. I'm I can understand rituximab, and I completely agree with Tarini's thought process that we have seen rituximab and COVID just do not go hand in hand. But 4 out of 6 indolent lymphomas and 6 out of 7 you have used GCSF. In indolent lymphomas, normally we don't use GCSF so much. So I just wanted to ask, is it indolent lymphomas but behaving like aggressive and you were treating them with chemo? That is one question. And second is very interesting finding about the solid tumors. All patients who died were of metastatic. See, your incidence of COVID positivity follows the incidence of cancer in general population. Largest number of patients, what we see is breast and then young lung. And we have seen the COVID positivity also in the proportionate to the number of cases, what you see. Head and neck was surprisingly very low, and the deaths were only in stage 4. That means that stage 1, 2, 3 who got COVID all recovered. So something to do with stage 4 cancer and COVID mortality. Just would like to know the thought process. I know there are no right or wrong answers here, but just would like to know the thought process from both of you.
So this is the data we observed from our 92 patients infected with the COVID cell.
Okay.
Dr. Amish, I'll come in. What I feel if there could be is they are a little bit shying away. So if you look at this slide also, the T cell versus B cell itself gives away that rituximab is a big culprit. And just look at it, we all expected leukemia and myelomas to do worst. They
Right.
did not.
They did not.
So this slide is a very important picture to come out that rituximab is the biggest culprit in the
I
hemat
completely
malignancy.
agree. But why
Can
are
I-
we giving importance to GCSF? That was my question, Tarini.
No, I think that's just Dr. Amish. Dr. Amish, I think that's just a compliment. Out of 7 people, 6 of them had received. So I think that's
Correct.
just torturing the
That's
data.
because they had coexistent neutropenia. So we that's what it is, and it's very difficult to attribute to GCSF anything. And
Correct,
the prolonged positivity, what Thomas spoke about was what we again expect with rituximab. That when you use rituximab, the positivity is prolonged, and we discussed
Agreed.
that in the previous one.
Agreed.
Coming
Tarini,
to your
completely
previous
agreed.
thing, there are enough data. Ullas will bail me out that in a metastatic setting, the deaths with COVID are much more than in the non-metastatic. So that actually followed because the general condition will be much poorer. They will be in a much poorer state, and the immunity and the fighting capacity will much. So I think that's what the world data is also. Ullas?
I think Badira has asked a question which is almost right to what you are saying. So what progressive disease in this metastatic patient could have contributed it? Were there mets to lung and a compromised lung COVID pneumonia? So what I have done in my data is we have tried to segregate, and what Badira also segregated, death due to COVID and death due to cancer. So they were like, advanced cancer patients who just came for supportive care in our setup, and we just got them tested, they came positive. So we have not labeled them as, so they're COVID deaths, but they're advanced cancer deaths. That's it. I'll come to my data. But just for the juniors, I mean, for the PGs and everyone, and for my knowledge also, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong. Last time in first wave of mortality, I thought myeloma did worse. I mean, correct me, I don't do much of myelomas, but that is what I was told in my hospital. That myeloma people in hematology had a bad mortality. I am not so sure. What is everybody else's experience?
That's exactly what I pointed. Leukemias and acute leukemia myelomas actually did the worst, but rituximab is coming out as the biggest culprit now.
The second wave.
Yeah. So Badira, what was your death rates with leukemias? Can you tell us acute leukemias? I'm sorry, I missed that part. What percentage would you induce, and what was the death? Or what was receiving a treatment during leukemia?
I think 4.3% was what Dr. Badira showed.
For leukemias? Or for the total subset?
Pediatric leukemias. Dr. Badira, please comment.
Yeah. So we had so we had 13 deaths, Dr. Sahu. We had 13 deaths, of which 3 was actually due to progressive disease. They were palliated and died within 1 or 2 days of positivity. And out of the 10, 2 were solid, and the rest were all hemat.
No. My question was different. If we take the leukemia subset alone, acute leukemia,
okay,
how much of these patients, let's say 10, or you induce 100 were on chemotherapy at that point, and that was X number of deaths. So I wanted the leukemia data actually, mortality.
Okay. So the thing is, so I have to tell you that this 219 patients. We have not fully analyzed those 219. We have only 122 which are properly analyzed.
Okay.
So these are the recent last 1 or 2. So they are
only 122. How many were acute leukemias?
So I'll just tell you.
That will be interesting to know, because you are telling what normally we expect the leukemias acute will be having little more deaths, which actually is not correlating here when the adult thing comes. So that is something interesting that has come out. Actually.
Okay, so solid.
That's fine. You can drop in the chat box also while things are going. Yeah.
Okay.
So out of 122, we had around 80. 84 were hematological malignancies.
Okay, so out of 84, 8 deaths happened. So it was actually around 10% for you.
No, out of 84, that 8 is out of 219. 219. So out of 84, I think around 6, 7 deaths.
So it's something around 6 to 8% is what you're looking at.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I think fantastic. Dr. Amish has written a message to me, move forward. So I am moving forward as the program director instructed me to do. The real reason for that is that I want to cut down on my presentation so that people don't ask me all these questions. Okay. So from west to south to east, Dr. Ghanshyam Biswas, the Sparsh experience.
Thank you, Ullas and Amish. Good evening, all. So, are you able to see my slides?
Sir, we are able to see this handsome man over there.
Yeah.
We are only able to see you.
Okay. So, wave one. So, I've taken it from April to October 2020. So, that was around 7 months. So, the present hospitals, that is Sparsh at Sahid Nagar. So, dedicated fever clinic 1 and dedicated COVID beds out of 100 were 31. And we have 4 dedicated consultants, 2 in medicine, 1 in pulmonary medicine, and 1 in critical care to take care of the patients, including most of the staffs who got infected, including me at that point of time. So coming to, again, wave 1, total admitted patients with COVID was 140. So either these patients were admitted for fever and got COVID positive, or they were COVID positive and they got admitted. So out of those admitted patients of 140, there were cancer cases were 7. And if you look at the total death in that period was around 14. And out of those 14, cancer cases were 3. And if you look at the denominator, so that will be an approximate. So COVID positive in cancer patients were 35 approximately. So if I take this as a denominator 35, so out of these 35, 7 got admitted and 3 died. So what were these 3 deaths? So number 1 was the first death in the COVID was a 55-year-old adenocarcinoma lung who was on a second line of Cyramza and docetaxel. He came with fever, high fever, respiratory distress, not agreeing to be a COVID. We did a COVID, the next day RT-PCR positive. He got shifted over to a COVID dedicated hospital designated by the BMC, and the subsequent day, so 2 days later, he died. The second patient was a triple negative patient, locally advanced on a neoadjuvant. So this is a patient who was on the 4th cycle of anthracyclines, neoadjuvant, diagnosed with COVID, then COVID pneumonia, ventilator, and so by that time she also had a neutropenia. We lost her around day 9 or day 10 of the COVID treatment. So this was a disease curative intent. And the third death was a young adolescent, 18-year T lymphoblastic lymphoma, who was actually doing bad in terms of disease because advanced disease had come back on a palliative setting. So he got for a fever admission, and though we thought it was neutropenia, by the time we sent the COVID, it also came positive, and very subsequent day he died. So three deaths. So 1 advanced lung cancer on second line, advanced disease, COVID death. The child who was doing bad in terms of disease, COVID was accidentally detected because he had fever. And the third patient was on a neoadjuvant for a triple negative locally. And so out of 3, so 1 was a curative intent death. So if you summarize the cancer patients, because the COVID, the first wave was totally different. In terms of lockdown, we can see from these 7 months, we have seen around 2,400 patients in the OPD, around 1,880 chemotherapies in the daycares and indoors, 146 cancer-related surgeries, and there were 34 deaths in the cancer, but only 3 deaths were related to COVID. And rest, because I'll show you in the subsequent slide, because this was the time when many patients from many of the metro cities could not travel, and suddenly, so we had an influx of in the second tier 2 cities. We have more number of patients, and many patients were terminally ill. Many patients were multiply treated. So wave 2, so I've taken it from February to May, so that is around 4 months. Now, by this time, Sparsh Hospital, we were ready with another infrastructure. So on the left-hand side, this is the primary hospital. So dedicated bed from 31 to move to 33. And we had continued to have a 4 dedicated consultant. On the other hand, so from 20 kilometers from the present hospital, we had that is known as Sparsh Contabado, which was a COVID dedicated hospital, and that is we are running the hospital, but this is funded by the government, the purely like COVID dedicated hospital. So the dedicated, we had around 200 beds, but dedicated COVID beds, which we have already dedicated to government, is 120. So here you can see a medicine person is 1, pulmonary medicine are 4, critical care 1, and there are 8 residents who are dedicated in treating these patients. Out of 120, we had 42 ICU beds in this COVID dedicated hospital and 22 HDU. So coming on to the main center, so we had in these 4 months 215 admissions, out of which there were 8 cancer cases, and total deaths are around 26. So out of these 26, again, these were also cancer cases are 3. In these 3 cancer cases, so we had one patient who underwent a surgery for a Whipple's, who was negative at baseline. He had some complications on day 9, 10, and then he had a fever. Then suddenly the counts dropping. So this patient was detected on the 2nd week of post-surgery, where it was detected to have a COVID. So this patient crashed within next 2-3 days, and we lost this patient. So other 2 patients was a multiple myeloma, which was multiply relapsed, so relapsed and refractory multiple myeloma with renal failure, who was undergoing dialysis and was planned for carfilzomab based therapy but not started. And the 3rd patient was a 60-year-old mantle cell lymphoma stage 4, who had recurred after a primary treatment 1 year back because of maintenance therapy. Because of the first wave, he could not take. So this patient was on a 2nd-line therapy of rituximab and CVP, because bendamustine was received almost 10 months back. So 1 multiple myeloma, 1 mantle cell lymphoma, and the 3rd was a post-surgery. So another patient was also post-surgery for CS stomach. So this patient was shifted from the primary unit to government hospital, but this patient ultimately recovered. So if you look at the denominator of COVID positive with antigen or RT-PCR at our institute or different institutes, so this was approximately 60. So we can take this 60 as a baseline. So admissions were 8 and deaths were 3. If you look at the government side, so total admissions, which has crossed 1200 by this time, but till May 2021 was approximately more than 1000 and almost 114 deaths. So if you see the whole wave 2, so around these 4 months, we have seen around 1200 patients in the OPD, 1200 chemotherapies, 80 cancer-related surgeries, and there were 33 cancer deaths. So out of these 33, so only again, so 3 were attributed to COVID, where there was a documentation. So some issues which every one of you must be facing. So quite a few of our patients got admitted in a different hospitals and private or a dedicated government hospital. So few deaths without COVID report, maybe a handful of patients where there was highly suspicion of a COVID. So these patients either could not do the COVID, or by that time the COVID report was there, so we lost the patient. There were many patients, especially in this wave, they got transferred from other hospitals from a private setup coming to our government setup, that is COVID dedicated hospital. Lastly, in first wave, many advanced and multiply treated cancer patients who were traveling to maybe Ullas, Amish, Tata Memorial, Bangalore, Chennai, Vellore even. So this was surprisingly not seen in the second wave. So before I end, so my deepest gratitude to the most senior resident, Dr. Bharat Das, Dr. Priyadarshini is our COVID nodal officer, Pushpa, Banashri, Hemanta, Harapriya, Sadha, Asit, and Siddharth, who have helped me to collate this data. Thank you so much. So over to Ullas and Amish.
Fantastic, Dr. Ghanshyam. Too good. I mean, to maintain a data like this and come out of the presentation is fantastic. So Badira, Dr. Badira, can I ask you to comment on this? Your thoughts on this data?
Yeah, that's actually a wonderfully kept data to collect data on both cancer and non-cancer patients. I mean, whoever you were consulting. So one thing from this, so the cancer patients are actually a very small cohort in that, but even then, for your cohort, the mortality is actually higher. If you look at it, it's somewhere around 8 to 10% mortality of the patients, whether it is COVID or cancer or a non-cancer patient. So you can see that there is a higher mortality in that group. And when you said COVID positive were around 35 or 60, you meant you had tested irrespective of symptoms.
No, these were patients. 80% of them had some symptoms,
Okay.
and these are patients who come from those quarantine zone or something, the containment zone, and then they were found positive.
Yeah, so that's one thing which strike us. I mean, the mortality is a bit on the higher side. If you look, even the non-cancer patients, so that is something to look at, because they shouldn't be having other other causes which are contributing to the death. I mean, it should be mostly COVID.
But Badira, the 10% what he's showing, I would expect them to be severe category patients.
Right.
That's why the admission happened. He's not shown in the normal thing, the normal positive patients. So normally that 1 to 2% comes to is that out of all COVID patients, there is 1 to 2% death.
So this is only the category severe COVID
category. These are only admitted patients. So you don't have the denominator. So it can be in 10,000s also. No?
Okay. Yeah. And regarding the last conclusion that you made, like you didn't see many advanced patients coming with COVID this time to the hospital.
No. So my intention over that in the first wave, so we saw many. So my OPD was running 60-70 patients in the peak of COVID. So this time, so when things are different, so we are seeing less than 30 patients. So many patients who are traveling to many of the major cities or major institutes, so they got arrested here for those few months. But this is not happening in this wave 2.
I know Ullas is laughing at 60 patients. He feels he's the only one who can see 60 patients. Okay, but coming to serious things, Ghanshyam bhai has a great data. The only thing I wanted to ask is what I get out of your data is your positivity rates has been somehow similar in the first and second wave for cancer. Me and Ullas, both of have presented a little bit spoken about earlier. The number of positive patients for cancer with COVID this time was huge. Right. I had 50 patients positive, with most of them asymptomatic in the first wave for 4 months. This time I'm putting the data together. It is around 300 to 400 patients positive, although admitted only 60 or 70. So there is a huge number of patients positive for you.
But
that was not seen here.
The point here is that, so I'm just seeing less than half the patients what I am seeing as compared to wave 1 and 2. If I was seeing 60 patients every day in the first wave, so I'm seeing 20-25 patients. The number has also dropped. So if you take that into account, so it will be on the higher side, no?
Yeah, that's true actually. The impact of this, because there were people who were not coming to you only.
Right.
So actually, that is the invisible impact that COVID has had. We don't know how many people couldn't reach you.
This actually happened in all second cities. The second wave has hit the second wave cities also. The first wave, our practice doubled actually. In the second wave, it shrunk little bit, as Dr. Ghanshyam is rightly pointing out. And Ullas is so happy to hear that.
The second wave only second wave में खाली webinar doubled हो गया, नहीं तो ऐसे तो काम हो गया.
No. But I still strongly feel out of your data, your positivity rate has been much lower than what all of us have witnessed. Ullas, your take on that, because I feel that's a very strong thing I'm getting out of this.
Sir, it all depends upon how many people you tested and symptomatic, asymptomatic were tested or not. So I think a denominator in all the 4 studies is totally different. That's my take.
I think you have tested everyone before chemo, so that's why
no,
our denominators are nearly same.
No, I'm not doing for every patient who on chemotherapy.
Okay. That will happen because I do it.
We don't. I don't. So now, so let me present. Amish, can I go ahead? Can I present my data?
If I say no, what will you do?
Then I present my data.
Please go ahead. You are the moderator. You are the boss today.
Okay. Only for today. That is the
Amish boss, save your best for him now.
Okay. So here we are from Delhi. The COVID capital in the second wave after we again beat Mumbai fair and square. At least that there is one place we can beat Mumbai, not in IPL. So COVID-19 and cancer, this is data from my own unit. That's a single unit. We will be discussing about the disease course. I'll be presenting you some data between the first and second wave. I'll give you some data about the vaccine and did chemotherapy really affect the COVID-related severity of fatality. This is just a slide that I have taken because since I was supposed to be the first speaker, so I thought I'll present some masala into it. That's I have taken, and this is the way first and second wave actually looked like from the BBC's point of view. So here we go. Only cancer patients. We took patients with proven malignancy at a single medical oncology unit between June, so between April and May 2020. That's what was called the first wave. And between March end and April 2021 June, that's called the second wave. All the patients had to have a proven malignancy. Everybody had to have either a COVID positive RT-PCR or gene expert. We haven't taken any rapid antigen positive. That is what we did. So in 8 months from April till December, we had 123 patients. In the second wave, in the span of predominantly April and May, we had 177 patients. So there is where the difference. And when I say 123, 177, let me also clarify about the denominator. These are the people who WhatsApped me that, okay, sir, हमें ना COVID हो गया है, हम क्या करें? I would tell them, you send me your report, I'll note down their number, I'll call them up again. The people who come now to my OPD in the month of yesterday, like somebody had come today and said कि सर हाँ April में COVID हो गया था, but हम अपने घर में manage हो गए थे. I have taken those patients also. So these are not all symptomatic patients, obviously. Anybody and everybody who told me that they have had COVID and came to the OPD, I have taken those people, which was in first wave and second wave. So first wave, which was spread over 8 months, we had 123 patients. Second wave, over 2 months, we had 177 patients. The gender, male, female, by and large was equal. Cancer site, basically, that's predominantly the distribution that I do most. I do more of lung and breast and GIT. That is why probably our patients are like this. But these were by and large comparable between the first and second wave. The comorbids were there seen in 20 to 22% of patients. Smoking history was given 24 to 18% of patients. So this was the difference or the distribution of the cancer types in first and second waves. In the first wave, it was 35, 51, and there's some discrepancy in the number. Then 27 for GI, GU, and the others were like this. So predominantly lung cancer had around 100 people. Now, was there a difference between the age or gender or comorbids or smoking? Whether anybody got chemotherapy before and after? There was nothing. And death also, in the first wave, we had around 17 deaths out of 123. In the second wave, we had around 34 deaths out of 177. So again, I have tried to classify, COVID-related death is basically somebody who was doing by and large okay, and then had signs and symptoms of COVID. Somebody with an advanced disease, I still remember somebody was PS4 lung cancer, just came with the same condition and what he was around 2 days back, and we got a COVID tested because we had to get that tested, and then died, was called off as a cancer-related death, and there was no features of CRP or IL-6 or raised. Now that's very, very important, Dr. Sahu. That is what probably you wanted to see. In the first wave, 80% of people did not get hospitalized. 20% of people got hospitalized. But again, beds were never a concern in the first wave. Anybody who wanted to come and get admitted, we were admitting. The second wave, again, not hospitalized were around 70%. Hospitalized were around 21%. So if you look at the hospitalization between the first and second wave, by and large similar. It was only, in my opinion, the magnanimity of the thing, everything clustered into 1 month. That was what was the real evidence. There was data unavailable for 17 people. People didn't pick up the phone. I can't really say about that. Again, the case fatality ratio in the first wave was 9.8%. We have taken a 15-day case fatality rate because that is what the major journals who have reported, they have come. It was 5.6%. In the second wave, it was 13.1%. 15-day case fatality rate was 7.2%. So trend towards worsening. But my gut feeling again is, as I've been telling, it was the sheer magnitude of the COVID which impacted us in the second wave. The entire hospitals got full. We were short-staffed. We didn't know where to go. our entire the medical oncology people were doing duties. That is what really came over there. A very important thing is
can you go back, Ullas?
Yeah, sure.
This one. Yeah. So my point here, you're looking at the first wave and second wave. That is one, and the severity and fatality means that your ICU 8 is, what is the 8 in ICU?
ICU number of people who got admissions in ICU.
Absolute number of people.
But the point is, in the second one, the wave, there were no ICUs. I mean, we had to manage them in the ward only.
Yeah. So did you correlate with the ward people and the deaths?
I will just show you some data in the time to come, sir. What was very important, what was very important from my point of view was whether chemotherapy was anybody that we gave chemotherapy around a month back. Let's say, so my point, that's what I was asking Badara, was that if we had given chemotherapy to them in the month of March, was that important? Was that an important risk factor for the death? That was not. I mean, that's the most important factor. We lost one lady who was on adjuvant hormone therapy for last 8 years. And we lost people who we have given Arvenda also, people have survived. So giving chemotherapy or radiotherapy or surgery was not a negative prognostic factor amongst the two waves actually. This is what I think a slight this thing, Dr. Sahu, you also try to understand. It is difficult to get the data out of it. The first wave, ARDS was seen in 8 and 1 was ventilated. Second wave, it was in 19, 2 were ventilated. People did die without them. Also, 6 or 7 of them died without getting the ventilator. Pneumonia was seen in 8 and ventilation was 1. So that's a very small factor that we have done. We had more deaths in the second wave in the ward also as compared to ICU, but that's predominantly because of the fact that we had no ICUs available over there. We did not get any case of acute liver injury, acute kidney injury, or MI was encountered. There was one patient of MI, but that was a non-COVID related MI which came. So that was the data. We spoke about the vaccination status, and this was what we have presented in CRST. So I'm just presenting. Again, we called up 752 people from the last month of May or June. And what we found out that 29% of people had taken a single dose, 57% of people had taken both dosages. In the vaccinated group, 15.6% of people got COVID, but none of them died. In the non-vaccinated group, 21.9% got and 11.9% people died because of COVID. So that's for me very important. It's whatever. I mean, you need to vaccinate people left, right, and center. This data has gone out for publication in CRST. This was the age-wise distribution. Again, has to be a bit skewed because people who were elderly were allowed to get vaccinated earlier. But irrespective of that, vaccination really prevents the death. This was a month-wise distribution. Again, in February, nothing used to happen. March, June, and now there's a mayhem. Now everybody wants to go to Hope Clinic for vaccination actually over there. So 2 months, we have 177 cases versus first wave, 6 to 8 months, 123 cases. The CFR of the case fatality rate of the second wave is more than the first wave. A trend towards overall, but we're not sure. There are more complications in the second wave as compared to first. More importantly, there was no relation to chemotherapy. Vaccination awareness, only 25% of people got vaccinated. Vaccine hesitancy is definitely an unmet need that needs to be answered. So with this, thank you. We are so many and still counting. I really hope we stop that counting soon. So, thank you, and over to you, Ramesh boss.
Excellent, Ullas. Actually, no sarcasm, but really very good data. I think the way you are trying to dissect that is extremely important. And I'm very, I think we learned a lot today out of Indian data than what we learn. So many interesting facts, but once we start asking the right questions, we will slowly start getting the right answers also. Ullas, can I ask you 2 questions?
I was preparing for a debate with, I think, Kumar or Senthil, and then it came, it is not the thing which you said before the but which is important. Excellent. But can I ask you, it's the thing which follow. So yes, Dr. Amish, please.
All across the world, males are 70%, females are 30% affected. In this thing, they were almost equal in both first and second wave. So just wanted to know your thought process. It's just an observation. And I wanted to ask, in fact, every presenter, obesity and age across the world are the two single most factors for COVID-related mortality. Ullas, since you have dissected and you have tried to dissect your data so nicely, so well, if you have BMI data in your file, it would be really interesting to see people who have died is obesity, because that is constantly coming up across as #1 cause of mortality with COVID.
So I haven't really looked at obesity data, but that's a fantastic point. I will ask one of the PGs to look at it tonight. Work for them.
Ullas, your vaccination data is really, really amazing, and I'm very happy that you are publishing it. I think that is something which we need to stress upon on every people. I would request Tarini or any other people, if they want to ask Ullas simple questions. Questions are simple for him.
Three points. First thing is, when I look at your data, I get one feeling which I'm getting from Dr. Ghanshyam's data also. The severity which all of us expected, because lung complication was more, which required more of admission. But if you look at the data very, very carefully, except for a marginal increase, the admission, and same with Dr. Ghanshyam's thing, is equal for both the waves. So that's something which I didn't expect at all. I expected the number, it could have been in the 1 month, but the percentage is not much of a difference. All of us knew that lung was getting affected more. A lot of patients would have got admitted, the bed factor being a factor which you have already spoken, but that was something that was striking even Dr. Ghanshyam's presentation, that the number of the severity was much same, equal to first wave.
So I think, are you talking about lung cancer? I can just tell you.
No, not lung cancer. Look at your data for the number of patients and the admissions. It's looking same, which we expected to be much more in the second wave. Yeah, so that's something that has come out Dr. Ghanshyam data also. So maybe data gives us the right picture.
Yes.
Number two, none of you in any presentations, that's one thing I really look into, have shown the uncontrolled diabetes, have not looked into uncontrolled diabetes. So can you look into that, because you would get something very interesting out of the.
Sir, we did not get any correlation with the uncontrolled diabetes or hypertension. So we didn't look at uncontrolled diabetes.
Yeah, uncontrolled diabetes. Do you have the data?
I did show the data. There was no significance in the people who died versus without who died, sir.
How many had? You don't have anything.
20%, 18 to 20%, sir.
Okay. So none of the presenters showed that, which all of us have seen that it's a huge factor, at least in the way, because ketoacidosis has come in a huge way. Vaccination, I have one only point which you can clarify. In that 25, the mortality of 13 or 11%, which is showed in non-vaccinators. Can you just tell me how many of them were stage 4? That's something very important, parallel, which I would like to look when you show that, not to take away the importance of vaccination. I want to be very clear on that. Looking at the data critically, I want to say how many of the deaths which happened was then those patients were terminally ill. Can you tell that?
Sir, I mean, again, I don't have the data offhand because I don't really know that.
But because you have the numbers of patients who have died, can you go back, because that will be something very interesting to see.
I can find that out, sir. I think it should not be a problem. But generally, what I have seen is that only, 12 to 15%, 20% of people have died because of cancer. 80% have died because of the COVID. So I don't think it has got anything to do with stage of the disease.
No, but one thing, if you can look at in present sometime
later,
it will be very interesting that vaccinated, you told 25%, none of them were needed admission or deaths were not there.
I will do that, sir.
Yeah. And if there is more stage 4 here, then that would now correlate with that. There's something to do with that also.
I can do that, sir.
Yeah.
There's just one more comment that I wanted to make, since so I have thought about my publications in 2-3 ways. One, we have vaccination we have already given to CRST. We are in the process of, in the last ASCO, there was a plenary presentation by the this group, the Lung Consortium group, and which we are also a part of, TerraVault group, in which they showed a 33% mortality rate in lung cancer patients. In our 100 patients, we have hardly got some 14 or 15, even including first and second wave. So that is one special data that we are collecting in a big way, and we are going to present it to a JTO or a ESMO presentation over there. Maybe in a month, I can tell you lung specific data.
Okay. All the best for that.
So Dr. Amish or Badira, any comments?
No, I think, we are good, this thing. If anybody has any questions or any chat box question, Kashish, if we have not answered, we can take it up. And all of you, please understand, this is the time to grill Ullas. Normally he does others, and you should not miss this chance. Dr. Badira, very good data बोलने से कुछ नहीं होगा, कुछ सवाल पूछो उल्लास को.
No, what I wanted to say is, even though you had a chunk of lung cancer patients in whom you say that there is increased mortality, still I think your denominator spanned even asymptomatic patients who had mildly symptomatic and severe disease. And if you look at that from that point of view, your mortality is still very high when you compare the rest of the data,
Yeah, so,
even in
I mean,
cancer patients now.
So I think the mortality rate in first wave was 10%. This is 14%, and that is what people with comorbids, it has been shown around 8 to 10%. In the West, the first wave did show lung cancer 33%. If you compare the first wave, we had only 8%. Second wave, we have 14%. So yes, the second wave was more, but yeah, it's still lesser than the West. That's what I can say. The problem in our all data will always be the denominator, because see, we have taken people who got mildly infected and they got a COVID and then was isolated home. So that has also been taken. So denominators of all the 4 studies are different. That's my take on all the data.
Correct. I think, it was a very, very interesting discussion. Dr. Parekh sir told me to give the concluding remarks because he said he will be in the car traveling. Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute, Sparsh Institute, Apollo Hospital, and of course TMH Tata Hospital. Really thanks to all of you for bringing out this amazing data.
Amish boss, so should I tell one single line before we conclude and you conclude this thing?
Yes, boss.
What has really come up in this 4 data or 3 data is one important thing is, for me, what I've seen is most of the thing that has happened is either a neutropenia, either a very advanced malignancy, or rituximab. These 3 are important with the mortality. We really look into what this is intended to, the patients who died, and we look at across the centers, acute leukemias, rituximab, and neutropenia. These are something which are killing our cancer patients in COVID. That's what I take home as a message.
So TP, so I will add another thing. So before you add, so another thing is that somebody who has delayed or ignored their symptoms, or they have lately presented to us, so that is the most important thing.
That's what I told, advanced cancer. So I think this is something.
No, not advanced cancer. Advanced cancer, somebody is on treatment, off treatment, but symptomatic for COVID.
Agree.
So I tend to slightly disagree with both of you. I think, a point is our group is such an heterogeneous group right now in COVID. It's like, Tarini, we have discussed so many times about remdesivir and tocilizumab. In oncology, we are so used to having a homogeneous clinical trial groups. Here, anyone and everyone in Ullas's OPD, anyone and everyone in Ghanshyam's OPD or Badira's OPD and IPD, we have taken this data. I think this data needs to be dissected further. But one point, Tarini completely agreed, time and again, rituximab and COVID do not go hand in hand. That is coming out, I think, in every presentation. In addition to that, everything else is an observation. Yeah. Whether they are causality for increased mortality, I'm not very sure at this point of time. But yes, they may turn out to be causality. Right now, I would take that as an observation rather than the causality.
After doing these things, I'm so scared of rituximab. When I get the patient, I tell.
I have said no to at least so many of maintenance rituximab.
I remember Badira telling that they, except for Burkitt, sometimes they have stopped rituximab.
So we have been scared since we first reported that paper. So none of our patients except the.
I never expected rituximab that to be so bad till I really saw this, and
correct,
this data
correct. Yeah. In fact, Tarini presented a very good data on the respiratory failure of 3 of the patients where even reinfection also was very common. I remember that. So that is one thing which is definitely becoming a causality. Rest all are, I would say, Tarini, is an observation. With that, I would like to conclude today's session. Again, it's an amazing. We don't have to say wherever Ullas is present, it has to be amazing. We don't have to say it again and again. Thursday,
somebody mute Dr. Amish.
Thursday, we are again going to see Ullas. And Thursday, we are going to have a very, very important topic again. And we all have started seeing ongoing or pulmonary fibrosis, which is going to become a reality in our day-to-day practice. In fact, there are 2 patients of pulmonary fibrosis who are for chemotherapy. I'm at loss. How do I treat them?
And if anyone finds a drug, SMS me. I need that very badly.
So I would, moderators are 2 stalwarts in this group, Dr. Ullas Batra and Dr. Tarini Sahu. I think I would request both of them to come out with how they are going to divide. We can have the case presentation. If anybody has a pulmonologist who has treated many pulmonary fibrosis, please give me their names, or please give Kashish their names. We'll reach out to them. I will try to see if Dr. GC Khilnani is also free. Would love to have his comment as well. And I would sincerely request everyone to be present about this and stay safe. Thank you so much. And with this, Kashish, we can close the session today.